So if you followed me for a while, you probably have are like, hey, here's this person again that I used to follow a long time ago. And I don't blame you if that's what you're thinking, because the truth is I don't make content basically at all. Um, and I have been thinking about that a lot lately and trying to figure out some of why that's happened, and also to try to get over some of the very silly reasons why it hasn't been happening. So, just as some context, I like early on in my career, I used to churn out content. I mean, absolutely churn out content. I remember September of 2011 specifically. It stands out because I was like one of the first months after I created my blog, and I was like studying for the CCNA, I think, and so I was writing a blog, at least a blog a day, just on whatever I was learning at the time. It was very learning in public kind of style, and it really like struck a chord with me because it allowed me to a build a public profile, b sort of uh, get evidence to myself that I knew these things because it's like written down, right? I'm not just relying on the certificate that I was pursuing, but I just like in my words had like the content that I learned. So clearly it was in my head at some point. And I think it was pretty clear to me even then that actually it helped me with retention, because again, like I could always look back on that blog and say, hey, like I forget how this works, and there's a blog written in my words, my thinking, where I could just really quickly redigest it. So I used to do that a lot, and certainly I think for the first at least 5 years of my career, I was pretty good with it. Maybe not that super breakneck pace, but like once I actually got a job out of college, I slowed down a little bit. But I did very well with that in my earlier career. And I know it's a trope, like, oh, I wish I made, like, I just remember even the past, like the first 10 years of my career, it was always like, I really should write more, or maybe the midway point of my career, midway meaning like between now and the beginning. It's like kind of a trope. Everybody says, like, I really should find time for blogging because everybody gets caught up in their day jobs. And I think I fell into the just like easy trap of being, young and being like, oh, that'll never happen to me. Well, guess what? It happened to me. So like that's why I'm here. So like lately, I've been really thinking about what just generally content creation did for me in my career, and maybe thinking about what specific reasons it sort of fell by the wayside for me. Because I think that the realization I'm having, not now. I think I've known this for actually quite a while, but it's just reached this weird breaking point that I have to like I'm actually having to do something about it. But the realization is what content creation actually does for me, not just as a everybody's doing it, it helps create my profile. Yes, those benefits are there, but like the intrinsic motivation. I think I lost that, and I'm trying to figure out how to get that back. Another reason this is becoming important to me right now is I, again, have had this realization for at least a few years. What I'm doing now in my career is, I think, by far the most technically interesting and sort of aligned with my actual interests. But like 90% of the content I have on the internet feels like it's from at least one entire lifetime ago. So I've been trying to do a few things. The first of which is to just stop thinking so much and just start putting content out there. And I'm really bad at that. The video you're watching now is partially in service to that objective. And honestly, I've been struggling with this video. Like I can hear this like internal voice telling me not to put this out because I don't like have all my thoughts collected. Um, and so I'm just intentionally, just blatantly ignoring that extremely strong inner voice that that I'm not ready for this. And the reason I'm ignoring that inner voice is because it's pretty clear from the evidence that that voice is not aligned with my interests. I've gone through, I must have gone through at least a few dozen full like round trip cycles through this journey of, oh, I wish I did this thing more often, to you need to give yourself some grace, you have a family, like you have all these constraints, and so on and so forth, like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Now, of course, and I think it's definitely true that we generally as a society should be way more forgiving of ourselves when we sort of falter from, the things we quote should do, and that's a whole other rabbit hole of like where that comes from. But let's assume that it's for healthy reasons. I think you still have to acknowledge like you do what you prioritize. And intellectually, I do believe that sentiment that the things that you end up doing are your priorities. Generally speaking, there's of course exceptions to that, but generally speaking, I think over the long term, you do the things that are most important to you. And so it pains me to say that actually because I'm hardly somebody that follows this well in terms of the ideal. So again, I would like to think that I prioritize creating content and doing things, that I used to enjoy, but the track record is just not there. So figuring out why that track record isn't there has become more and more important to me as the years go on and as the backlog of content ideas continues to pile up. And that's another thing that sucks about all this is my brain hasn't stopped. I have a shamefully long list of content ideas that I just have not taken action on. And it's actually created this weird like cognitive burden for me because again, I can't shut my brain off. And I had my sort of formative technical years in this model of content creation, so it's always in the back of my mind. Even though I'm not really doing it as much these days, it's always something I'm thinking about. I can't really shut that off. But of course, if I don't have the outlet, it doesn't go anywhere. It just piles up and then it just weighs on me. And I think I've reached this breaking point where I have to do something about this. So part of this is me thinking really hard about what I consider my greatest strength. I feel like I have this tendency to go on autopilot and just kind of go down the path of, oh, I work with Rust, so I should be a Rust specialist, or I work with like Linux networking constructs, so I should know everything about that. And there's definitely some balance to be struck there, but the realization I'm having now is one that I've had before and I kind of just forgot, which is I'm not really a specialist. That's just not the way my brain works. I am a jack of all trades. It's what I am best at doing. I actually am like fighting my strengths by trying to just pick a lane. And it's tough because if you're, especially, you get into a certain point of your career where you're you're surrounded by specialists, and it's just really hard to ignore that and find solace in the fact that you're just not like them and you have your own unique strength. The pull to conform is strong. At least that's how it's felt for me. So anyway, I have a future video. I think it's worth diving into that in a future video, I think. But I wanted to add that here because it's definitely part of this. So anyway, given that my strength is sort of to be a jack of all trades and learn a lot of new things very quickly in very different areas, that is my strength. It's what I've always been good at, and I want to start re-nurturing that again because I think it is the thing that is more uniquely me than anything else. And again, part of that was this thing that I did very intuitively early in my career, which is learning in public. And I don't think I realized until much more recently how not only helpful that was, but actually like crucial that was in not only my ability to learn, but to retain that knowledge. And again, I'm focusing for this video mostly on the intrinsic benefits because I think the extrinsic benefits are somewhat obvious, right? Building your own profile, like all these things do happen, and those benefits did happen for me, and I'm still benefiting from those things. But that doesn't tend to, you reach a certain point in your career, and that extrinsic stuff tends to fall in value, and so I'm trying to rediscover the intrinsic benefits. And so what is it about these things that I actually enjoyed? Not even necessarily what did it do for me, but what was the because I had joy in doing these things. So why is it that I would have stopped doing something that brought me joy? And I think that leads me into the next thing I want to talk about, which is what's gotten in my way. So of course the easiest answer here is that these days, in not only the stage of my career that I'm in, but also my stage of life, I just have a lot more on my plate and a lot less time to do things like content creation. And of course that's not untrue. Like such is the nature of having a young family. And certainly this is the part that sort of anybody in this position should be most forgiving to themselves. But again, well, two things. Again, if it's important to you, you do it. And just because you have a more constrained set of time and energy, if it's important to you, you should make time for it. And you just need to be more selective on what you put on your plate. And I'm horrible at this, by the way. This is me sort of confessing that I've done that horribly. And I'm trying to do better at that. But the truth is, this is something I want to do. Nobody's making me create content, and thank goodness, because if somebody was, then I would have been fired a long time ago. So if it's something that I still just want to do, and it is, why haven't I been doing it? So one thing is the kind of content that I used to make is in one of like two buckets. One of which was sort of a technical, I don't want to say tutorial. I never really did tutorials, but sort of a walkthrough or a deep dive or a something like that. And then the other bucket is sort of like, I'll say opinion kind of, but I think I got like way too thought leadery with some of the content that I was making, like sort of the rules of automation. And again, this is like the era of my career that I was in. I was actually like in a sort of marketing adjacent role. And so part of that was just sort of me fitting in with the role that I was imagining that I wanted to be in. Um, but I made career changes because I realized that wasn't for me. And so again, I now have this new stage of my career that I think is way more aligned with my interests. So I did this when I first started at my current job. I did this deep dive into, I think it was IPv6 FreeBIND or just IPv4 and v6 FreeBIND, something like that in Linux. And that was a lot of fun. It was actually really relevant to what I was working on at the day job, and it was a lot of fun. But the problem is now that kind of thing might be obsolete thanks to LLMs, maybe, maybe not, but certainly the uh, like figuring out how it works, that kind of general thing, is just its days are numbered. I think the tooling that's becoming available to even the layperson, somebody that doesn't have a technical skill set, it's going to totally commoditize that. So I think I really need to go back to the drawing board with respect to the kind of content I want to create. And actually, I kind of feel fortunate in that because you know uh, I've seen a lot of content creators who are they sound heartbroken. It's heartbreaking to me, but they sound totally depressed about how they've created this career based on content creation for these kinds of like technical deep dives, tutorials, and things like that. And you know, LLMs have effectively taken that from them, and I feel fortunate that I don't have to have this like content backlog that's just going to die because LLMs exist now. And that sucks. That's gotta suck. So I'm kind of having the same thoughts that those folks are, because I don't, what kind of content fits in this like Venn diagram of content that makes me happy but is also useful in the age of LLMs. That's going to be an ongoing thing for me. And then there is the, I'll just say it, perfectionism bar. And it's actually laughable at this point because, again, I feel like I shouldn't even call it perfectionism because, again, it sort of implies that the implication there is that I do produce content regularly, but I just have this insane bar of like quality. And so I might publish content more slowly, but I'll still get it out, and maybe it'll take more energy and effort from me because I have this high bar. But even that's not true because I'm just not publishing anything. So I don't even know what to call it. It's like perfectionism plus plus. It's totally irrational. Not even It doesn't even make sense a lot of times. Like I'll give you some examples. Like this video is actually a great example because it's not even there is no bar really. This is why it feels worse than perfectionism because there is no definition of done. For this video, I had to literally convince myself to just start recording. And I'm still having these thoughts in my head of like, this shouldn't be published. So it's not even perfectionism. It's like this totally unbounded requirements space of I need to somehow, I guess, wait until I have all the thoughts. But when will I have all the thoughts? I don't know because I keep getting thoughts. So like, what is? It's just never done. And I've been on this merry-go-round many times, way more times than I care to admit. It's shameful, honestly, how long it's taken me to come to this realization that I should just stop listening to that inner voice. But either way, we're here. So I'll call it perfectionism plus plus, but I think I it'll be a struggle for me, but I'm going to do my best to just, if I have a thought, I'm going to start recording. And then another big one, and I would love to hear if anybody else is struggling with this, but I've had this struggle for a number of years. I am at a reasonably senior part of my career. Um, you know, in terms of time, hopefully still sort of the midway point or maybe even earlier, just because, I hope to be doing technical things for a lot longer. I don't plan to retire anytime soon, but I do like what I do. And so I've reached this part of my career where I'm in a fairly senior role. And anytime I think about creating content, I have this totally irrational, but still very strong feeling that every little bit of my content that is going to be nitpicked and viewed through the lens of where the reader feels like I should, or the viewer feels like I should be at in my career based on my title, employer, whatever. Which, even saying that out loud, I know that's irrational. I know that that's not how I should be thinking. And also, again, it's not even really definable because you have to sort of anticipate what every person reading or viewing your content is thinking about you, which isn't even possible. It's not, obviously it's not even it's not healthy either, but it's not even possible. How are you can't really generalize that. So this is it's weird actually to say this out loud because I gave this advice early in my career to folks that were older than me, and because I was cranking out content, and so they were actually coming to me with advice on how to do that. And I told them all of the things that I'm now finding I have to tell myself. Like, don't even think about it. Just put it out there. Don't worry about what people are thinking about you. Just put it out there. Don't worry about if somebody else is doing something similar. Just put it out there. And I was so arrogant to believe that I would never fall into that trap. And of course I did. I did. Full bore, like fell into it. Wasn't even close. So that's the realization I'm having now. Okay, so what am I going to do about this? I think one of the biggest things that I need to do differently that I've not done yet is more informal videos, more off the cuff, no plan, just a really high level outline of kind of the thoughts that I want to convey and get out of my head. And then, of course, rely on, post video editing to make sure it's, sensible. But in general, like the idea of just putting a video out there on sort of loosely collected thoughts is something I think I need to do a lot more on. I'm trying to focus more on things that I've not done in the past because the things that I've done in the past again may not apply, and of course I have bad habits around some of that. So I'm trying to shock my system a little bit by doing something totally new. And I think one of the things that I'm going to need to do is to just not try to pick a lane with the content I make. Like sometimes I might create content to learn, sometimes to reinforce. Sometimes I might create content about a thing that I actually kind of already know, but maybe the details are falling away just because I don't do it all the time. Because the truth is, my day-to-day is extremely varied. And so I forget details about things that you would look at my resume and you're like, wow, he's an expert in that. But I'm totally not. Again, I think that's a misalignment of what my actual strengths are. I am outclassed by miles in just about every area that I would consider myself skilled in by other folks who maybe focus way more on that one thing. And I think I've reached this realization that like that's something that is not only okay, but I actually need to nurture that because it's the way I am. So I need to do better at that. But anyway, the content that I need to make is going to be just as varied. Sometimes I'll make it to learn, sometimes to reinforce something I already know, sometimes to educate, maybe. I think in my head I've felt like I need to justify or explain which it is, and that has become nothing but a point of resistance for me, and I have to just discard that. So I'm going to be putting out content that aligns with any one of those things, and I'm not going to worry about explaining which one it is because it's clear that that's not a useful thing to have in my head. Another thing that I might do is a newsletter. I had this thought recently where I have sometimes just a collection of links, and it'd be great if I could just dump them into some, weekly or monthly or whatever the cadence is, list where I just give like a really brief thought on each because I think it's like kind of useful, but it's not worth like a blog post or a video or anything like that. And yeah, maybe a newsletter will be good for that. Maybe I also just need to become more okay with deleting links. That's also certainly possible, but that's something I'm playing with right now. And then finally, probably the easiest thing for me to do, aside from just sharing my thoughts on a concept generally, is also just sharing my thoughts on maybe an article or a video. I know, there's folks out there that do this. Primeagen is the one that comes to mind for me just because I've been watching his stuff for a while. But it's, I think for a few reasons. One of which is AI is just going to make this kind of content more valuable, and it's going to devalue the other kinds of content. So, even if somebody else is sharing their opinion on a particular thing, the age-old advice of, hey, you have your own opinion, you have your own take on it, it's just as valid in like stand-up comedy, right? Like, just because two comedians tackle the same premise doesn't mean that they're ripping each other off. There's only so many premises in the world. There is a way to put your own spin on a premise, and so I just need to like take my own advice in that respect. So I'll probably be doing that a lot, if only to just get myself back in the habit of doing this more regularly. All right, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you very soon.